This is a story about betrayal, investigation, and the most devastating domino effect of karma you'll ever hear. It involves a cheating wife, a naive husband, a cocky affair partner, and a private investigator who uncovered everything. By the end of this story, one man will lose his job, his home, his family, his dignity, and his freedom. This happened in the early 2000s, the era of AOL Instant Messenger, dial-up internet, and people actually writing passwords on sticky notes. Remember those days? Well, one sticky note changed everything. Let me take you back to where it all began. It started with something small, something most people would brush off. My two kids were 4 and 6 years old at the time, still young but old enough to tell you about their day. And they started talking a lot about Grandma and Grandpa's house. Now, don't get me wrong, grandparents' houses are magical places for kids. Unlimited snacks, no rules, all the attention in the world. So it wasn't weird that they mentioned it. What was weird was the frequency. See, my wife's parents lived about 90 minutes away, an hour and a half. That's a 3-hour round trip. And according to my kids, they were going there 2, sometimes 3 times a week. Let me put this in perspective. My wife worked part-time, so she wasn't working every day. But apparently, on almost every day she wasn't working, she was driving our kids to her parents' house. That's 6 hours of driving multiple times a week. For what? A few hours with Grandma? Something didn't add up. So I did what any concerned husband would do. I asked her about it, casually. "Hey, honey, the kids mention your parents' place a lot. Are you going over there that often?" And here's where I knew something was wrong. She denied it, flat out. Said the kids were exaggerating, that it wasn't that frequent, that I was misunderstanding. But here's the thing about my wife. She was never a good liar. Her voice would get higher, she'd avoid eye contact, she'd fidget with her hands. All the tells were there. I knew she was lying, but I didn't know why. I'm not the type to just let things go. Call it paranoia, call it intuition, call it whatever you want, but I knew something was going on. So I started playing detective. I began tracking the mileage on her car. Nothing crazy, just writing down the odometer reading every few days when she wasn't looking. And I did the math. The results were shocking. She was driving an extra 400 miles per week. 400 miles. To put that in context, her parents' house was a 180-mile round trip. If she was going there twice a week, that's 360 miles, which would account for most of it. But she was supposedly going there 3 times a week sometimes, which would be 540 miles. Yet the numbers showed 400 miles consistently. Where was she really going, and why was she lying about it? I knew at this point that some serious shit was going down, but I didn't have proof. Just numbers, suspicions, and a gut feeling that my marriage was falling apart. Then fate intervened in the most unexpected way. One ordinary day, I came home from work and sat down at our shared computer. This was back when families had one computer in the house, usually in a common area. No smartphones, no tablets, just one desktop that everyone fought over. And there, right next to the keyboard, was a small yellow sticky note. On it, written in my wife's handwriting, was her AOL screen name and password. Now, I want to be clear. I'm normally the type of person who snoops through someone's private messages. I believe in trust, privacy, boundaries, but at this point, with everything I'd been noticing, with the lies, the unexplained mileage, the weird behavior, I couldn't resist. I logged into her AOL account. And what I found made my blood run cold. There were email exchanges between my wife and her college best friend. Casual conversations, lots of girl talk. But buried in those messages was the truth I'd been dreading. My wife was having an affair. The emails were explicit. Her friend knew all about it. They discussed it like it was some exciting secret, some thrilling adventure. My wife talked about how she was regularly fucking one of her ex-boyfriends from high school. But it got worse. Not only was she cheating, but she and her friend were mocking this guy's wife, making fun of her, laughing about how she'd gotten fat after having kids. The cruelty was stunning. Here was my wife betraying our marriage, and she had the audacity to mock another woman for the physical changes that come with motherhood, something my wife herself had experienced. I sat there, staring at the screen, feeling like my entire world was crumbling. But I didn't panic. I didn't confront her. Instead, I did something smarter. I printed out every single email exchange, every message, every cruel joke, every detail about the affair, and I stashed them somewhere safe, because I knew I was going to need evidence. At this point, I had proof of the affair, but I didn't have the full picture. I didn't know who this guy was, where they were meeting, how long it had been going on, or how deep this rabbit hole went. I needed help, professional help. I called a friend of mine who was a cop, explained the situation. He listened patiently and then said, "You need to call Ron." Ron was a guy who left the police force to become a private investigator. My friend vouched for him completely, said he was discreet, thorough, and worth every penny. So I called Ron. Meeting him was like something out of a movie. We met at a diner, I slid him the printed emails across the table, and I told him everything I knew. The mileage discrepancies, the lies about her parents' house, the emails about the affair. Ron looked at everything, nodded slowly, and said, "I can figure this out, but it's going to cost you." I paid his retainer without hesitation. At this point, I needed to know the truth, all of it. And Ron delivered. Over the next few weeks, Ron conducted surveillance. He followed my wife. He documented everything. And when he finally presented me with his report, I had the complete picture. The report was meticulous. Photos, timestamps, locations, license plates, everything. Here's what really happened. My wife would drop our kids off at her parents' house. Then, instead of spending the day there like she claimed, she would drive to meet this guy, her high school ex, for lunch at various restaurants. After lunch, they would go to a cheap, dumpy motel on the outskirts of town. They'd spend a few hours there, then she'd drive back to her parents' house, pick up the kids, and come home. She'd been doing this for months. The betrayal was complete. The lies were everywhere, and now I had undeniable proof. Before I tell you what I did next, you need to understand why this hit me so hard, why I couldn't just brush it off or try to work through it. See, I grew up in a household where both my parents cheated on each other. It was a nightmare. The screaming matches, the lies, the manipulation, the way they used us kids as pawns in their twisted games. The infidelity didn't just destroy their marriage, it destroyed my entire childhood. It fucked up me and my siblings in ways that took years of therapy to even begin to process. I swore to myself that I would never put my own kids through that. That if I ever got married, it would be built on honesty, loyalty, and respect. That if my partner ever cheated, there would be no second chances, no working through it, no false reconciliation for the sake of the kids. Cheating was a hard line for me, non-negotiable, unforgivable. So when I discovered my wife's affair, there was never any question about what I would do. I was getting a divorce. End of story. But I wasn't going to just let this slide. I wasn't going to quietly walk away while she and her affair partner continued their little fantasy with no consequences. No, if I was going down, I was taking them both down with me. I asked Ron to dig deeper. I wanted to know everything about this guy. Who was he? What was his life like? Did he have a family? What did he do for work? Ron, being the professional he was, came through once again. The affair partner's name was Bob. He was married. He had 3 kids. And here's where it gets interesting. He worked as a vice president of sales for a company owned by his father-in-law. Let that sink in for a moment. This guy was living the cushy life, married to the boss's daughter, secure job with a fancy title, probably made good money, had 3 kids at home. From the outside, he looked like he had it all together. But he was risking all of it to sleep with my wife in cheap motels. The more I learned about Bob, the more I realized he wasn't just some random guy. He had everything to lose. His job depended on his marriage. His home, I later found out, was owned by his wife's parents. His entire life was propped up by his relationship with his wife's family. And he was throwing it all away. I saw an opportunity.